Imagine stepping out onto a serene Australian beach just as the sun begins to break over the horizon.
Oh, that early morning air.
Right. It's December 1st, 1948. You are on Somerton Beach, which is this quiet, relatively affluent coastal stretch just outside of Adelaide.
Yeah, a really picturesque spot.
Exactly. The air is crisp. It's likely just starting to carry that early summer warmth, and the rhythmic sound of the ocean is like the only thing breaking the silence of the dawn. You are taking your morning walk, maybe looking for shells, when you glance toward the seawall. And there, propped up against the cold stone, you find this perfectly composed mystery waiting for you.
Just waiting right there on the sand.
Yeah, it's a man. His legs are outstretched. His feet are neatly crossed at the ankles. His head is bent slightly to one side, just resting against the wall.
Almost like he's just taking a nap.
Yeah, right. His posture is so incredibly casual, so deeply relaxed, that if you had walked past him the evening before, which a local jeweler named John Lyons and his wife actually did, by the way, you would have just assumed he was a bloke sleeping off a heavy night of drinking.
Which is exactly what they thought, yeah.
But he wasn't sleeping. He was dead. And that casual, almost theatrical pose completely disguised the absolute chaos that his discovery was about to unleash on the world.
It really did.
So welcome to our deep dive into the source material today, where we are tackling the enigma of the Somerton Man. And look, our mission here isn't just to play armchair detective, shuffling around the same old cold case file.
Oh, we want to go deeper than that.
Exactly. We are using the physical clues this man left behind on that sand to explore a chaotic, fascinating, and deeply traumatized era of global history.
And we have some really fantastic material to guide us.
We do. We're leaning on an incredible stack of sources today, primarily a brilliant academic historical analysis by Ruth Valent titled The Somerton Man, An Unsolved History, alongside this granular, borderline obsessive bibliographic investigation from the Cipher Mysteries blog.
Yeah, the level of detail in that blog is just wild.
It's amazing. So we are going to dissect the physical evidence, the strange cultural backdrop of 1948 Australia, and a bizarre literary artifact that turned a local tragedy into an international obsession.
Well, the sheer calmness of that scene on the beach, juxtaposed against the magnitude of the mystery, is what immediately captures the imagination.
It's so jarring.
It really is. When John Lyons returned to the beach for his early morning swim at around 6:30 a.m., he noticed the man hadn't moved an inch since the previous evening.
Not a single inch.
Right. So Lyons takes a closer look, realizes there was no breathing, no movement, and flags down the police. And by the time the authorities arrive, rigor mortis has already set in.
Oh, wow. So he's been gone for a while.
Exactly. The pathologist who later examined the body put the time of death at roughly 2:00 a.m. But what makes this scene so baffling, right from the very first police photograph, is the absolute absence of violence.
Yeah, you expect a dead body on a beach to tell a story of a struggle.
You really do. But here, there was no evidence of a fight, there were no defensive wounds, no visible signs of blunt force trauma or, a stabbing.
Nothing like that at all.
Nothing. The sand around the body was completely undisturbed, meaning he hadn't thrashed around in his final moments. He even had a half-smoked cigarette lying completely uncrushed on his open shirt collar.
Wait, uncrushed?
Yeah, just resting there, as if it had simply slipped from his lips as he passed away.
Okay, let's unpack this physical description, because the man himself is a walking contradiction based on these sources.
Oh, absolutely.
The police reports detail a man around 45 years old. He has gray eyes, he's clean-shaven, and the officers specifically note, and I find this fascinating, they note he has an expression on his face as though he might have been an educated man.
Which tells you a lot about the class assumptions of 1948 Adelaide police, doesn't it?
Right. Whatever that implies. His hair is graying on the sides, slightly receding, described as a ginger but mousy color. And he's physically fit.
Very fit.
Yeah. Detective Lean, the main officer assigned to the case, described him as being square on the shoulders, implying a robust, active lifestyle.
And, the physical anomalies really only deepen when you look at the medical reports.
Oh, sure.
Like, he was uncircumcised, which was a notable demographic detail in mid-century Australia. He had his own teeth, but 16 of them were missing.
16? That's a lot.
It is. He also had a few small scars on his left arm.
Yeah.
But perhaps the most peculiar anatomical detail came not from the police, but from the taxidermist who embalmed the body.
Oh, right. The calf muscles.
Yes. This is a professional who works with human anatomy every single day,
Yeah.
right? And he made a special underlined point to note the man's highly developed calves.
That is such a weird detail to stand out.
Right. In his expert opinion, this man's leg muscles were a distinct peculiarity. They were shaped like those of a ballet dancer, a long-distance runner, or someone who habitually wore high-heeled boots.
Like a stockman or a horse rider?
Exactly.
A ballet dancer or a cowboy dying on a beach. It's such a weirdly specific physiological trait.
It really is an odd picture.
But the major contradiction that I keep getting stuck on in these sources is his hygiene. I mean, this man was exceptionally clean. The pathologist explicitly noted that it was highly common for people who end up in the morgue, especially unknown transients, to have dirty, unattended toenails. But not this guy.
No, his toenails were perfectly manicured and clean.
Yeah, even more bizarre, his shoes looked as though they had been newly polished that very morning.
Right.
There was no sand stuffed into the leather, no mud from a long walk. But then you look at his hands.
Oh, the hands.
His fingers bore the deep, dark yellow stains of an aggressive, heavy smoker.
Yeah, and that heavy smoker detail is completely corroborated by the inventory of his pockets.
Right, because of the cigarettes.
Exactly. Along with that half-smoked cigarette resting on his collar, he had another one tucked casually behind his ear, ready for later.
Just like tucked away.
Yeah. He had an open packet of Army Club cigarettes, though interestingly, they have been refilled with a more expensive brand called Kensitas.
Which is such a specific mid-century detail.
It really is.
Yeah.
And he also carried a box of Bryant and May matches. It sets up this fascinating dichotomy.
It really does.
You have a man who takes meticulous care of his grooming, his nails, and his footwear, yet has the deeply stained hands of a chain smoker.
Well, let's look at the autopsy, because this is where the medical science of 1948 hits a massive brick wall.
Oh, a total wall.
They open him up, and his heart is completely sound, no cardiovascular disease, no blockages, so they immediately rule out a sudden natural heart attack.
Right.
In his stomach, they find a half-digested Cornish pasty, suggesting he ate a few hours before dying, but they also find extreme stomach congestion.
Severe congestion.
Yeah. We are talking about severely congealed blood in the stomach lining, alongside swollen, congested organs elsewhere in the body. Medically speaking, everything screams poison.
It absolutely does. The congestion in the stomach is highly consistent with acute poisoning.
So why couldn't they find it?
Well, we have to understand how forensic toxicology worked in 1948. I mean, it wasn't the instantaneous, comprehensive mass spectrometry we have today.
Right, no CSI labs back then.
Exactly. Dr. Robert Cowan, the government analyst and chemist who tested the tissue and blood samples, was looking for the usual suspects.
Like what?
Well, he tested for cyanide, which leaves distinct traces and smells. He tested for alkaloids like strychnine, which causes horrific, violent convulsions before death.
And we know there were no convulsions here because the sand was undisturbed.
Precisely. He also tested for barbiturates and carbolic acid, and the result. He found absolutely zero trace of any common poison.
Wow.
Cowan stated on the record that he didn't think any common poison caused the death. He hypothesized that if it was poison, it had to be a very rare, sophisticated toxin.
Something you wouldn't normally see.
Right. Something rarely used for homicidal or suicidal purposes. During the inquest, experts actually floated the idea of digitalis, or strophanthin.
Okay, explain how those work, because the idea of an invisible poison sounds like science fiction to me. How does a chemical kill you and then just vanish?
It's wild, but it comes down to how the human body metabolizes different chemical compounds. Strophanthin, for example, is a cardiac glycoside derived from the seeds of certain African plants.
African plants.
Yeah. Historically, it was used on the tips of poison arrows. But in the early 20th century, it was used in minute doses as a heart medication.
Okay, so what's around?
It was. Now, if you take a massive lethal dose, it essentially paralyzes the heart muscle, causing rapid cardiac arrest.
Right.
But the key mechanism here is its metabolic half-life.
Right.
It breaks down in the bloodstream incredibly fast.
Oh, I see.
By the time a pathologist draws blood hours after death, the chemical structure of the poison has completely metabolized and dissipated.
Leaving nothing to find.
Exactly. It leaves behind only the secondary physical symptoms, like the severe stomach congestion and the sudden heart failure. It leaves no chemical fingerprint that 1948 technology could detect.
So Professor Thomas Cleland, the city coroner, is just left holding this impossible puzzle.
A total nightmare for a coroner.
I mean, by the time of the inquest 6 months later, all he can officially conclude is that the identity of the deceased is quite unknown, his death was not natural, and it almost certainly was not accidental.
Which doesn't give them much to go on.
No. The man was either murdered with a highly sophisticated, untraceable poison, or he committed suicide using that same untraceable poison.
Right. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the coroner's dilemma touches on something deeply unsettling about death in that specific era.
How so?
Well, the historian Philippe Arias, who wrote extensively on Western attitudes toward mortality, noted that by the mid-20th century, death had become intensely sanitized.
Sanitized, like pushed out of view.
Exactly. It was becoming hidden away, almost shameful. People were increasingly dying in the sterile environments of hospitals, out of sight, rather than in the parlor room at home.
Right, the whole culture around it changed.
Yeah. And if someone committed suicide in the 1940s, it was almost always done privately, behind the locked doors of a cheap hotel room or out in a back shed. Murder was sometimes public, but it was usually violent, bloody, and visibly chaotic.
But the Somerton Man completely inverts that. I mean, his death was bloodless, it was pristine, and it was incredibly public.
It was. His death completely violated the natural social order and the expected conventions of 1948.
It really broke all the rules.
To die so neatly, so deliberately, in a place where anyone walking up the steps to the Esplanade would easily see you, it defied reason.
Yeah.
It alarmed his contemporaries because it wasn't just a quiet passing, it was an imposition on the public space. It was a spectacle that stubbornly refused to explain itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it's like a Broadway director meticulously staging a theatrical set, ensuring the lighting is perfect, the props are in their exact places, the stage is swept clean, but then they completely forget to cast the lead actor. It's a glaring paradox.
That's a great way to put it.
Think about the logistics of this. If you are going to ingest a hyper-rare, exotic cardiac glycoside that metabolizes out of the body so quickly it leaves no chemical trace.
A very complex way to die.
Right, a process that implies an incredible, almost surgical level of sophisticated planning. Why bother polishing your shoes that morning?
Yeah, the shoes.
If your ultimate goal is to vanish from the earth without a trace, why do you care about the scuffs on your leather Oxfords?
It points to the profound ambivalence of the man's final actions.
Total.
On one hand, he went to immense calculated trouble to erase his identity. But on the other hand, he maintained deeply ingrained, mundane human habits right up to the bitter end.
He really did.
The contents of his pockets are a masterclass in ordinary life.
Right. We have this phantom who might have used an untraceable African arrow poison, but his pockets are full of the most banal normalcy imaginable.
Say normal.
He had an unused second-class railway ticket to Henley Beach. He had a bus ticket showing he had taken the bus from the city center to Somerton. He had a packet of juicy fruit chewing gum. He had 2 combs, 1 aluminum and 1 plastic. It is literally the pocket lint of an ordinary guy running errands on a Tuesday.
And you really have to contrast that juicy fruit gum with the state of his clothing.
Oh, the clothing is so creepy.
Every single identity label on the coat he was wearing had been meticulously, precisely cut or torn out.
Every single one.
He carried no wallet, no cash, no identification card, no letters, nothing that indicated a name or an address.
Just a ghost.
It is this aggressive clash between the banal consumer goods of everyday life and the absolute terrifying void of his identity that makes the case so compelling.
Yeah, I agree.
Elaine Corbin, a historian who wrote The Life of an Unknown, talks about the challenge of trying to reconstruct a human life from the silence surrounding it. But in the case of the Somerton Man, the silence isn't an accident in time. The silence is absolute, and it appears entirely deliberate.
Deliberate invisibility. I mean, he was a master at erasing himself from the clothes on his back.
He was.
But if you wipe your identity from the things you are carrying, where do you keep the things you can't carry? He had to have baggage somewhere.
And he did.
Right. And that takes us away from the quiet, sandy scene at Somerton Beach and directly into the bustling grand architecture of the Adelaide railway station.
2 weeks after the body was discovered, detectives made their first massive breakthrough.
Finally.
Detective Lean and his partner, Len Brown, were checking luggage depositories around the city. And they identified a brown leather suitcase that had been checked into the cloakroom at the Adelaide railway station on November 30th.
The day before the body was found.
Exactly. It had been sitting there unclaimed ever since.
Now, how they linked this specific suitcase to the unidentified body in the morgue is just a phenomenal piece of old-school, pre-digital police work.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They didn't have DNA profiling. They didn't have CCTV cameras tracking his movements from the beach to the station. They had to rely on microscopic physical evidence.
Down to the thread.
Exactly. They matched thread. Specifically, they found a spool of Barber brand sewing thread inside the suitcase. Forensic investigators placed this thread under a microscope and compared its weave, its unique orange color, and its texture to a repair made on the pocket of the trousers the dead man was wearing.
And it was a flawless, undeniable match.
Right. That orange Barber thread was not available for purchase in Australia at the time, making it an incredibly specific physical link.
It was the vital connection they desperately needed. So the police eagerly opened the suitcase, hoping to finally find a passport, a diary, anything that says who this man is.
You can imagine how excited they were.
Oh, sure. Inside, they find a wardrobe that paints a picture of a rather tidy, entirely self-contained life.
Very neat.
There's a red checked dressing gown, pajamas, slippers, handkerchiefs, shaving gear, a stenciling brush used by merchant seamen for cargo.
Oh, that's an interesting detail.
Yeah, and trousers that still bore the faint chalk marks of a recent trip to a dry cleaner. Everything was kept well and folded neatly. But, just like the clothes found on his body, almost all the manufacturer and identification tags had been carefully, deliberately snipped out with scissors.
Almost all. Here is where the plot throws us a massive curveball.
The biggest curveball.
Amidst all this carefully sanitized clothing, they find 2 items with names clearly written on them. A tie bearing the name T. Keen, and a singlet labeled Keen, spelled K-E-A-N, without the E at the end.
So naturally, the police thought the mystery was solved right then and there.
Of course they did.
They launched a massive search for anyone named Keen or Keen who was reported missing anywhere in Australia.
Must have taken forever.
They checked the manifests of every ship at every port around the country, looking for deserters or missing merchant sailors. They checked military records.
And the result
was absolutely nothing. No one with that name fitting his physical description was missing.
Unbelievable. The police were just grasping at straws at this point. I mean, Detective Lean even wrote a formal letter to the police superintendent suggesting that maybe Keen wasn't an English name at all.
Right, trying to find any alternative explanation.
He thought perhaps it was a corruption or an anglicization of a foreign name. They ended up bringing in an Egyptian man who was employed locally in Adelaide, a Mr. Moss Kaipitz, to look at the handwriting on the tie.
And Kaipitz offered a rather fascinating, if highly speculative, linguistic theory.
Yeah, very speculative.
He suggested the name on the tie was actually Kianic, pronounced Quanic, and that it was likely of European origin, maybe Czechoslovakian, Yugoslavian, or from the Baltic states.
Okay.
He even suggested that the initial letter, which the police assumed was a T, was actually a J written in a sleeping Arabic script.
That feels like a huge stretch.
It does, but the police took this seriously enough to send the theory to Canberra, to the Department of Immigration and Customs, asking them to check for any incoming migrants named Kianic.
And let me guess.
It was just another dead end. No trace of a Kianic anywhere in the immigration registries.
Okay, I am putting my foot down on the whole Keen clue. Think about the psychology here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you are some sort of high-level secret agent, or even just a very determined private citizen who has spent hours meticulously cutting the labels out of your coat, your trousers, your shirts, making sure you are a ghost,
Right.
why on earth would you leave 2 name tags with the name Keen right there in your suitcase? It makes absolutely zero logical sense.
It really doesn't fit the pattern.
It's like buying a vintage jacket at a thrift store today. You buy it, and it might have some previous owner's name written in Sharpie on the inner collar. You don't necessarily cut it out because it doesn't matter to you, it's just a shirt.
That's a great point.
In 1948, Australia was just coming out of a massive war. The economy was still operating under a policy of strict austerity. Clothing had been heavily rationed during World War II with coupon books, and that rationing culture continued well after 1945.
Yes, and that historical context is crucial for understanding the physical evidence here.
It changes everything.
During and after the war, the make-do-and-mend mentality was absolute. Charity services like the Salvation Army were constantly redistributing secondhand clothes.
So everyone was wearing them.
Exactly. Returned soldiers, newly arrived migrants, and poorer members of society were almost universally wearing secondhand garments.
Right.
If the charity or the previous owner didn't remove the old name tags, and writing your name in your clothes was very common for laundry purposes in boarding houses and military barracks, the new owners often just left them on.
It wasn't a big deal.
It is highly probable, almost certain, that the Somerton Man simply bought a secondhand tie and a singlet that used to belong to a guy named Keen. It is the ultimate red herring born of economic necessity.
We are assigning deep conspiratorial meaning to a basic symptom of post-war poverty.
That's exactly what happened.
But, you can't blame the police for being desperate. They were trying to solve a ghost story in a society that was fundamentally fractured.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the way the Australian public reacted to this unidentified body reveals a darker, deeply traumatized post-war nation.
Oh, so?
The Somerton Man effectively became a blank canvas for a grieving society. When the police put out requests for information in the major newspapers, publishing his photograph and physical description, they were completely inundated with letters and phone calls.
The contents of those letters from the sources are just heartbreaking. They really show the hidden psychological scars of the era.
They're devastating to read.
You have a Victorian woman writing in, absolutely convinced the dead man is her husband. A returned soldier she describes as having a very restless and moody disposition, whom she hasn't seen in 18 months. You have another woman whose husband disappeared 18 years prior, noting he had sleepy gray eyes.
Yeah, and there was a father desperate for news of his son who had told him he'd be home from South Australia in November.
So sad.
There was a man looking for his brother who hadn't been heard from in 25 years after leaving the family farm to marry a woman the family disapproved of.
It's just endless grief.
The sheer volume of these letters points to the profound anonymity and displacement of the era. I mean, the urban landscape of 1948 was littered with cheap boarding houses.
Right.
These were way stations for itinerant souls with no fixed address, men nursing war nerves, what we now understand as PTSD, who were slipping through the cracks of society frantically trying to rebuild itself.
There's one specific anecdote in the sources that perfectly captures how desperate people were to make a connection, no matter how tenuous.
Which one?
A man contacted the police entirely believing the victim was a former roommate he had lived with in a boarding house in Perth back in the summer of 1941. His primary evidence. He told the police he was a most peculiar type of man. He was in the habit of wearing a dressing gown every morning. I would know the dressing gown if I saw it again.
Oh, wow.
That was his entire metric for identification. He wore a dressing gown in the morning, so this dead man on the beach must be him. It shows how the police were just drowning in the unresolved trauma of the general public.
They were. And we must also remember the intense geopolitical backdrop of this moment.
Right, 1948.
This is 1948. The Iron Curtain is rapidly descending across Europe into the very dawn of the Cold War.
Things are tense.
Very. At the exact same time, the first massive wave of post-WWII displaced persons, often referred to as DPs, arriving in Australia. 16 migrant ships arrived from Europe that year alone, carrying thousands of refugees from shattered nations.
That's a huge influx.
And many of these people had deliberately altered, lost, or completely discarded their original names and identities to survive the chaos of the war, to evade Soviet authorities, or simply to slip into the Allied DP camps.
So for a massive portion of the global population in 1948, anonymity wasn't a suspicious choice. It was a necessary survival tactic.
Precisely. And that pervasive Cold War paranoia severely hampered the Somerton Man investigation.
How did it get in the way?
Well, the Australian police sent his fingerprints to the FBI in the US, to Scotland Yard in the UK, and to agencies across the Commonwealth.
The standard allies.
Right. But for reasons that reflect the deep geopolitical suspicions of the era, they never sent his fingerprints to the Eastern Bloc countries.
Wow.
And that's exactly where the vast bulk of those 1948 refugees originated. The investigation was artificially constrained by the political boundaries of the day.
So the suitcase gives them nothing but ghosts, socioeconomic red herrings, and geopolitical dead ends.
Pretty much.
But as it turns out, the most vital, explosive clue in this entire mystery wasn't in the suitcase.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't in the train locker. It was hidden deep inside the very trousers that the barber thread had repaired.
Yeah, months into the investigation, long after the initial autopsy, a chance discovery alters the entire trajectory of the case.
Just a complete fluke.
The forensic pathologist, Dr. John Cleland, perhaps out of sheer curiosity or just immense thoroughness, was re-examining the dead man's clothing. He was actually trying on the dead man's trousers to check the fit and tailoring. And deep inside, a tiny fob pocket
Wait, what's a fob pocket?
It's a small, highly concealed pocket, usually located just below the waistband, originally designed in the 19th century to hold a pocket watch.
Oh, right, okay.
So deep inside this pocket, he found something.
It was just rolled up tightly, resting deep in the lining, completely missed by the police during the initial searches on the beach and in the morgue.
Just completely missed it.
They carefully unfurl this tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper, and printed on it, in a distinct font, are 2 words: Tamám Shud.
And Detective Leonard Brown was tasked with figuring out what these 2 words meant.
Which couldn't have been easy pre-internet.
No. So he took the scrap of paper to Beck's Bookshop, a well-known establishment in Adelaide, and asked the staff for help.
Smart move.
They quickly identified that Tamám Shud is a Persian phrase. It translates broadly to the end or the finish. And more specifically, these are the famous final words printed at the very end of a renowned collection of poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Okay, let's dive deep into the Rubaiyat, because this is where the story shifts from a standard police procedural into something incredibly literary and philosophical.
Yeah, it really takes a turn.
Omar Khayyam was an 11th century Persian astronomer, philosopher, and mathematician. He was a brilliant scientific mind. But the Western world largely knows him because in 1859, an eccentric English writer named Edward Fitzgerald translated, or as Fitzgerald himself called it, transmogrified Khayyam's Persian quatrains into English poetry.
Yeah, and Fitzgerald's translation was indeed less of a literal academic translation and more of a creative, poetic reimagining of the original Persian concepts.
He took some liberties.
He did. But the underlying message he extracted from the text resonated profoundly with Western readers.
What was the message exactly?
The core philosophy of the Rubaiyat, as Fitzgerald presented it, is the absolute rejection of religious piety and orthodox dogma.
Okay.
It is a passionate call to stop worrying about the mistakes of the past, to abandon all anxiety about the afterlife or the future, and to live entirely, fiercely for today.
Just live in the moment.
Exactly. It celebrates earthly pleasures, drinking wine, enjoying physical love, appreciating the fleeting beauty of the present moment, because tomorrow is promised to no one.
It's essentially the 11th century Persian equivalent of YOLO.
That is exactly what it is, yeah.
You only live once, so drink the wine and sit in the garden. And what's wild about the historical context here is that Fitzgerald's translation came out in 1859, the exact same year as Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species.
Oh, that's a brilliant connection.
Right. So Victorian society is already grappling with this massive, earth-shattering scientific challenge to strict religious theology and the biblical creation story. And right alongside it comes this poetic, exotic little book whispering, hey, stop worrying about heaven and hell. Just enjoy your brief time on earth.
That is a brilliant historical parallel to draw. The poem tapped perfectly into the stirring, quiet rebellion against rigid Victorian strictures.
It gave people an outlet.
It did, and it was deeply steeped in the cultural phenomenon of Orientalism. As the cultural scholar Edward Said famously explored, the West frequently projected its own repressed desires for sensual, exotic, and uninhibited escape onto the concept of the Orient. The Rubaiyat embodied this perfectly for repressed British and American readers. It served as an accessible fantasy of heady sense, overflowing cups of wine, and mystical, carefree philosophy.
But Ruth Bellant's sources point out something fascinating. This wasn't just highbrow literature for the wealthy, educated elite.
Not at all.
Sure, modernist heavyweights like T.S. Eliot are obsessed with it, but the book was a massive cross-cultural hit in Australia across all social classes. It was a genuine craze.
A total phenomenon.
Frank Wilmot, an Australian poet who actually worked as a bookseller at the famous Coles Book Arcade in Melbourne for 35 years, made specific observations about the kinds of everyday customers who bought copies.
Yes, Wilmot noted that it wasn't just academics buying the book. It was all sorts of working class folks.
Just regular people.
They would come up to his counter and ask, have you got that there book of poems by some funny old Persian cow? Or they would ask if he had a copy of The Rubber Yet.
The Rubber Yet?
Yeah. It was incredibly cheap to produce, it was very short, and its themes of egalitarianism and living for the weekend made it universally popular.
The funny old Persian cow. I love that historical detail so much. So what does this all mean for our mystery? We have a man who manages to die a pristine, unexplainable death, carrying a hidden scrap of paper that says the end from a book entirely dedicated to rejecting the future.
What's fascinating here is the deep linguistic nuance of the phrase Tamám Shud.
Okay.
While it is often translated simply as the end, much like a cinematic fade to black on a movie screen. Persian speakers and linguistic scholars note it technically translates much closer to completed, wasted, consumed, or run out.
Consumed or run out. Wow, that completely changes the tone.
It does. When you apply that specific translation to a man who has meticulously erased his identity, neatly polished his shoes, folded his clothes at the train station, and ingested an untraceable poison, the phrase takes on a chilling, poetic perfection.
Like it was all part of the plan.
Exactly. His life wasn't just ended abruptly, it was completed. The fuel had run out, the vessel was empty. It aligns flawlessly with a meticulously planned, deeply philosophical exit from the world.
But here is where I have to push back on the popular mythology that is built up around the Somerton Man.
Okay, let's hear the pushback.
For decades, people have cast him as some sort of hyper-intellectual, poetry-quoting master spy. People hear the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and they immediately think of secret societies, high culture, and international espionage.
Sure, it sounds very James Bond.
But as Frank Wilmot's bookstore observations clearly show, everyone bought this book. It was the 1948 equivalent of a mass-market paperback pop song.
That is a crucial grounding point that often gets lost in the sensationalism of the case. The cultural domestication of the poem in Australia was incredibly deep and widespread.
Look at the 1926 edition illustrated by Ned Weathered, which was literally titled The Australian Omar Khayyam.
Oh, that's a great example.
The sources mention that Weathered had completely reimagined the ancient Persian philosopher as a larrikin Aussie bloke sitting out in the outback drinking beer.
Totally, completely localized it.
Yeah. The highly popular Bulletin magazine even ran a national competition to write the Rubaiyat of Australia, and they received entries from shearers, swagmen, and fruit growers rating verses about the Omar of the bush.
It was everywhere.
So, the fact that he was carrying a piece of this book isn't necessarily definitive proof of an exotic, intellectual, or upper-class background. It might just be the historical equivalent of finding a lyric sheet to a really popular melancholic country song stuffed in someone's pocket.
It's a vital perspective that demystifies the clue.
Yeah.
The poem was ubiquitous.
Exactly.
However, identifying the words on that scrap of paper was only the first step. Detective Brown quickly realized that to move the investigation forward, they needed to find the exact physical book from which this specific Tamám Shud slip had been torn.
Which sounds impossible.
And that quest opened up a completely new, infinitely maddening rabbit hole that would consume investigators for decades.
Because finding the meaning of the words is one thing, finding the physical book leads directly to the secret codes, and the phone numbers, and the nurse.
Right. So after the initial inquest, the police decided to make a massive public appeal. They released photos of the slip and asked everyone in the area to check their copies of the Rubaiyat. Remarkably, a local businessman came forward. He reported that he had found a copy of the book tossed carelessly through the open window of his car, which had been parked in his driveway in Glenelg, a seaside suburb very near Somerton Beach, on the evening of November 30th.
The day before the body was found.
Exactly.
The police eagerly examine this book, and they check the final page. The tear in the back page perfectly, microscopically matches the jagged edges of the Tamám Shud scrap found in the dead man's fob pocket.
They finally found the book.
They found it. But what they found inside the back cover of the book is what permanently turned this case from a weird, sad suicide into a full-blown Cold War thriller.
Oh, absolutely. When police examined the book, they noticed faint pencil markings. Under specialized ultraviolet photography, they found indentations on the inside back cover, indicating someone had used the book as a hard surface to write on.
Like an improvised clipboard.
Yes. The indentations revealed a series of capital letters arranged in 5 distinct lines, with the second line crossed out.
Just a jumble of letters.
It appeared to be a highly complex, undecipherable code. And alongside the letters, they also found 2 unlisted phone numbers.
Okay, let's talk about the code first. The police hand this over to Naval Intelligence, bringing in top code breakers who had just spent World War II cracking Japanese and German ciphers.
The best of the best.
Explain how they would attack a code like this and why they ultimately failed.
Well, in the 1940s, cryptanalysts typically started with frequency analysis. In the English language, certain letters like E, T, and A appear with predictable frequency.
Right.
If you are looking at a simple substitution cipher where one letter replaces another, you count the symbols and map them against known English letter frequencies.
Okay, makes sense.
But the string of letters in the Somerton Man's book didn't conform to any known linguistic frequency.
It was just random.
The naval intelligence experts concluded that it was likely an initialism, meaning each letter stood for the first letter of a word in a sentence or a poem, or it was the product of a one-time pad.
A one-time pad being the holy grail of cryptography, right? How does that work?
Exactly. A one-time pad uses a pre-shared key, often a book or a random string of letters, that is at least as long as the message itself. You use the key to encrypt the message, and then you destroy the key. Unless the intercepting party has the exact same key, the code is mathematically unbreakable.
Because it's completely randomized by the key.
It is structurally impossible to reverse engineer, and that is exactly where naval intelligence landed. Without the key, the code remains unbroken to this very day.
Wow. So the code is a bust, but the phone numbers, that was highly actionable intelligence.
Oh, very actionable.
One of those numbers led directly to a local nurse named Jo Thompson. She lived on Mosley Street in Glenelg.
Very close by.
Her house was incredibly close to where the businessman found the book in his car, and it was only a short walk down the coast to exactly where the body was discovered on Somerton Beach.
So the police immediately go to interview Jo Thompson. She was a young mother, and she completely and vehemently denies knowing the Somerton Man. She claims she has absolutely no idea why her unlisted phone number would be written in the back of this mysterious book.
She totally denies it.
Yes. But the sources note a profound psychological reaction during this interview.
What happened?
When police suddenly produced a plaster bust of the dead man, which had been cast by the police to preserve his features, her reaction was highly unusual.
Unusual how?
She reportedly seemed completely taken aback, going pale almost to the point of fainting.
Oh, wow.
She looked away, refusing to look at the bust again, yet she steadfastly maintained her verbal denial.
This raises an incredible question about the nature of historical evidence versus closely guarded family secrets.
It really does.
For decades, her absolute denial was the official police record. Case closed. However, as the Cipher Mysteries blog highlights in their deep dive much later, her own daughter Kate revealed in a national television interview on 60 Minutes that her mother did know the Somerton Man.
That's a massive revelation.
Huge. Kate claimed it was a dark, complex secret her mother took to her grave, and that she may have even had a romantic entanglement or a professional intelligence connection with him.
And that revelation completely recontextualizes the entire police interview.
Totally.
If Jo Thompson expected to see a plaster bust of a complete stranger, but was instead confronted with the face of someone she knew intimately, someone whose clothes she might have recognized, someone she knew was tied to intelligence work.
Right.
Her physical reaction of near fainting makes perfect sense. She was trapped between the shock of grief and the terror of being implicated in a potential espionage case.
Let's pivot from the human drama back to the physical book itself, because the bibliographic investigation conducted by Jerry Feltus is absolutely mind-blowing in its detail.
His dedication was incredible.
Feltus was a retired senior detective who essentially inherited the case. He spent 15 years painstakingly investigating every tiny granular detail. He tracked down the origin of the cigarette packet, the coat manufacturer, everything. But his search for the exact, specific edition of the Rubaiyat became a magnificent obsession.
It really did. The police had determined early on that the sont and paper stock of the Tamám Shud scrap matched editions published by Whitcomb and Tombs, a major New Zealand publishing and retail company.
Okay.
So Feltus goes hunting across the globe for Whitcomb and Tombs editions of the Rubaiyat. And here we encounter a frustrating bibliographic paradox.
Which is?
Whitcomb and Tombs was fundamentally a staid, conservative, rather boring educational textbook company. But in the 1940s, they were desperately trying to rebrand themselves.
They wanted to be cool.
They wanted to find an artistic edge over their competitors in the gift book market. To do this, they experimented wildly and inconsistently with different price points, formats, and cover designs.
They had these high-end deluxe presentation editions that cost 12 shillings and 6 pence.
Right.
These were beautiful books bound in dark green cloth with highly ornate borders, aggressively marketed as a W&T art production. But they also had a low-end, incredibly cheap line called the Courage and Friendship series.
The cheap booklets.
These were little, flimsy pocket booklets meant to be slipped into an envelope and mailed to a friend as a greeting card. They cost merely 1 shilling and 6 pence.
And because Whitcomb and Tombs was constantly experimenting with this cheap line, they changed the printing colors and layouts from year to year, sometimes from month to month, depending on what ink or paper was available during the post-war shortages.
It was just chaos.
One year the borders were cream, the next they were beige. The border around the text might be green during one print run and yellow the next. Furthermore, the inside front cover of these cheap booklets featured a printed list of the other titles available in the Courage and Friendship series. And as the publisher added new titles, like Robert Burns' poems or a collection of Shakespeare songs, that interior list changed.
So Feltus manages to track down a couple of first editions of these W&T booklets, thinking he has finally solved it, only to realize the font is slightly wrong or the page positioning is a millimeter off.
It must have been so frustrating.
The mass production of these incredibly cheap, disposable greeting card books actually created a nightmare for historians.
It really did.
Because there was absolutely no consistency in the manufacturing process. Finding the exact print run of the Somerton Man specific copy is nearly impossible today without a clear photograph of the inside cover list from the original police file, which has long been lost.
And this leads us to a profound irony at the heart of the case.
What's that?
The Somerton Man mystery is surrounded by elaborate theories of high-level international espionage, of Soviet spies, uranium smuggling, and unbreakable mathematical ciphers. Yet the physical vessel for this unbreakable code, the book that held the final fatal key to his identity, was not a deluxe leather-bound volume carried by a sophisticated secret agent.
No.
It was a cheap 1 shilling and 6 throwaway booklet.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the operational logic here. If you are a high-level spy passing a coded cipher that could compromise international security, why are you utilizing the cheapest, most disposable piece of mass-market junk available?
It's a fair question.
It is the equivalent of a modern, highly trained intelligence officer writing nuclear launch codes on the back of a crumpled, grease-stained McDonald's receipt.
That's a great analogy.
It severely undercuts the glamorous James Bond narrative we want to impose on the case. It brings us crashing back to the reality of a desperate man utilizing whatever cheap, accessible materials were at hand in a chaotic post-war world.
It perfectly encapsulates the entire mystery. The cheapness of the greeting card book, the secondhand clothes bearing someone else's discarded name tags, the untraceable poison that mimics natural physiological congestion.
All of it.
Every single physical clue in this case functions less like a window into the man's actual factual identity and more like a mirror reflecting the harsh, fragmented realities of post-war society.
Let's bring all these threads together. We started with a pristine body on an Adelaide beach at dawn. A man who managed to die without a struggle, without a trace of poison in his blood, and without a single identifying label on his clothes.
From there, we journeyed into the trauma of post-war Australia. We saw how a simple suitcase full of secondhand clothes became a blank canvas for a nation mourning its lost husbands and sons.
Yeah.
We explored how the massive displacement of people after World War II made absolute anonymity not just possible, but a common reality for millions.
We followed a tiny scrap of paper in a forgotten fob pocket to an 11th century Persian poem about rejecting the future and drinking wine. A poem that had been deeply co-opted and beloved by the Australian working class.
And finally, we ended up staring at an unbreakable cryptographic code scribbled in the back of a cheap, mass-produced greeting card booklet. A bibliographic nightmare that ultimately obscures as much as it reveals about the man who carried it.
So, why does any of this matter to you, the listener, sitting here today? It matters because the Somerton Man is the ultimate historical lesson in the profound unknowability of the past.
Absolutely.
It forces us to confront a terrifying reality: how easily a human life can be entirely erased, leaving behind nothing but a scattering of random, disconnected consumer goods, a bus ticket, a pack of juicy fruit, a cheap book of poetry.
It challenges our innate human desire for neat, resolving historical narratives.
We really want those.
We constantly want the file-stamped case closed, but history is rarely that accommodating. History is often just a chaotic montage of discarded clues that refuse to resolve into a clean, understandable picture.
And that leads me to a final thought I want to leave you with, something we haven't touched on yet. Think about our modern, hyper-connected digital age.
Oh, wow.
Today, achieving the Somerton Man's level of physical and digital anonymity is virtually impossible. You can't walk down a city street without pinging a cell tower or being captured on a security camera, let alone vanish without a massive digital footprint.
It's just not possible anymore.
But what if the opposite problem awaits us in the future? Consider historians 80 years from now. Will they look at the massive, chaotic digital footprints we leave behind? Our out-of-context tweets? our deleted browser histories, our fragmented text messages, our own modern digital Tamám Shuds.
That's a wild thought.
And find us just as baffling, just as hopelessly unreadable as the man found propped against the seawall on Somerton Beach.
The overwhelming noise and data saturation of the future might turn out to be just as opaque and impenetrable as the deliberate, carefully constructed silence of the past.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning the mysteries around you, keep looking closely at the details of the world, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.